All right, so today we're going to be talking about deserving and entitlement. And this is going to be a really, really good video if you have any issues around feeling that you deserve or don't deserve, or if you feel entitled, you want to get rid of it, or you feel like there's nothing wrong with entitlement. This video is going to break down both of these concepts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also, for the first time on this channel, I'm going to screen share one of my previous videos. So instead of me telling you to go back and watch that video on deservingness, I'm going to actually run it and I'm going to pause it and make commentary on the video. And the reason I'm going to do this, as a matter of fact, is because our divine mouse overlord 3308, he left a comment on one of my videos and he asked a question. And so I want to really address his particular question, but I think this question is universally applicable. So it applies to me, probably applies to you to some capacity, especially if you had a hard childhood. So what I want to do is I want to take my time and break this down. It's going to be a video that is probably not going to be universally popular because the format, I thought about this. I'm like, do I make the format so that it's accessible, or do I just really address our divine mouse overlord's question and leave it there? So I'm gonna do that instead. But again, stick with me if you're having any issues around deservedness or entitlement, and if you want to basically not reframe things but transframe. Basically, you're changing your entire reality around this. So effectively, my goal at the end of this video is to get you to actually be able to eliminate deservedness from your vocabulary entirely, right? That's the goal. Now, is it going to be entirely possible because it's in the English language? Probably not, but you get my point, right? As far as a concept and how it's applied to get rid of it. The video that I recorded, by the way, on deservedness, the one I'm going to share, was addressed in some places you'll see to like the law of attraction spiritual community. So it may not necessarily apply in the exact specific way that a lot of people use that word, but I mean, a lot of people typically tend to apply deserve in the way that I described. So as far as Overlord's question, he asks, and I'm going to summarize here, if I have any advice for how a person can get over an entitlement mentality. So he says here that he was reading the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And Mark's answer would be to constantly question our values and the metrics that we use to measure ourselves. So essentially what Mark is saying is that when you're constantly reframing and reassessing the way you're appraising whether you deserve something or not, you'll find that you can probably come to a more balanced perspective around like deservedness or entitlement, such that you realize that indeed you're not entitled to a specific thing or some kind of outcome. But then Overlord continues and he says, okay, but doing this would be a sacrifice to my self-respect. I feel that since I have a lot of issues from a shitty childhood and unfulfilling adulthood, that rings a bell. By the way, Overlord, my father basically abandoned me and my sister when I was 10 years old, right? So I totally get where you're coming from. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know exactly, uh, like you understand, you know my story to some degree. Uh, but since I have a lot of issues from a shitty childhood and unfulfilling adulthood, it would mean I don't deserve anything good at all in life since I haven't really added anything of value to another person's life. I'm going to address that specific point as well. What would be your advice to someone like me? How can I get over entitlement without debasing myself in my eyes? Great question. Excellent questions. First things first, let's talk about the difference between deserve and entitle. I told you this wasn't going to be like a university popular video. I guarantee you most people have clicked away from this video already. So if you're not one of them, you're probably going to stick with me through the rest of this video because it's actually very important. So deserve is a feeling, is basically feeling a natural right based off of your own worth or qualities internally, right? So it's kind of like the reward. It's more of a general sense. Like I deserve love, I deserve respect, you know, I deserve abundance, whatever the hell that is. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Uh, you know, I deserve recognition, I deserve success. These are like the general terms. It's kind of like more of like an ethereal sense. It's a feeling of like a right based off like your internal qualities. Entitlement is the right to claim that reward from someone or something else. So basically what you're doing is you're obligating the other person to give you what it is that you're seeking. So I think Mark Manson is not using this word I think, I don't know. It's been a while since I read that book. It's been many years, but he's not using that word in the way that most people use the word entitlement. Because Overlord, what's happening here with entitlement is when you give the title, like of your house to somebody, they're entitled to that house, right? When you make a contractual agreement with somebody and you say, if I give you X dollars, you're going to give me this thing, and you pay them the money, they don't provide you with the item, say for example, a computer, a pen, a phone, whatever, you're actually entitled to that because you engage into a contractual agreement where they're going to provide you X for Y that you provided them. So that's entitlement, really and truly. So when people use the word entitlement, don't get confused, because you actually are entitled to things in that context, in the context of like transactions, like business transactions, financial transactions. There is entitlement involved, but you can't technically be entitled to something in like the more ethereal sense, as in like, well, you're entitled. That, like, the way you're using entitled, I think you're really referring to deservedness, because I'm sure you're not saying that you have a right to claim, somebody else's woman or somebody else's money or somebody else's vehicle, right? You're not obligating somebody obligating uh, somebody to give you something of theirs just because, right? So entitlement is not really properly applied, I believe, in the way that people in the self-help community use the word entitlement, because entitlement implies that you've actually given something. Remember, it's kind of like a contractual agreement. You've given something to somebody, and therefore they're obligated to give you that thing. So you're entitled to the thing that they're supposed to give you because you've actually given up something of value to them that you've both mutually agreed upon. That's entitlement, right? So entitlement in the self-help community is typically not actually applicable. Like, most people actually refer to deservedness, right? Like, I deserve good things. I deserve money. I deserve, healthy relationships. I deserve a good life. I deserve these things. It's not like you want to take them from somebody else, right? That's typically more of like a sociopathic element. But that's, again, people who just, rape and pillage communities and societies, like, conquerors, dictators, like, these are entitled people. You know what I mean? So that's not really what we're talking about here. Really, we're talking about deservedness. So let me get into the screen share and we'll talk about the actual concept here. So here we go. So this is the video I recorded. It's called Debunking the Myth You Don't Deserve Anything, How to Take Your Power Back. Trigger warning. That's the video. A bit of a clickbait title, but you'll see why it's important. Welcome back. I'm going to trigger you today. You're going to be triggered quite a bit, but this is very important. The subject is why you do not deserve anything. Okay, you are not deserving. Everything that exists in this life is a gift. So you didn't deserve the clothes that were put on your back when you were a kid. You didn't deserve the food that was put on your table. You didn't deserve the shelter that was over your head. These things were just given to you. It had nothing to do with you demonstrating your worth or having, worthiness to actually to be provided those things that you were provided. You just existed, right? Your your existence was enough for you to have the things that you had. So everything was effectively a gift. You didn't do anything to show that you're worthy of those things. And you might think, well, deservedness is internal worth, isn't it? Well, that's the point of this video. So let's talk about it. So what I'm trying to say here is that your worth here is inherent. So it doesn't have to be proven. Your worth is inherent because effectively you're born. So don't think in terms of deserving or not deserving. Everyone was raised in different conditions that they did not control, right? So we didn't control the conditions that we were raised in. Deserve is just a concept. It's literally a concept. It's not a reality. So whatever is within you as far as life, like you have a right to life, it's not whether you are deserving or you're not, right? We all have different conditions, and our lives play out differently, and we have to take the tools that we have, especially as we grow into adulthood, and be able to use those to change our lives in specific ways that we want to see those changes. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So if you've determined, I'm going to read from my note, I'll break it down. If you've determined that you deserve something and you don't receive it, you're like, I deserve this, I'm worthy of this, positive thoughts, positive emotions, I see myself in the future, I have it. Ah, this is so amazing. And you don't receive it, then you've implicitly decided that the fault or responsibility lies outside you. Because if you're like, I deserve this and you don't get it, then it's somebody else's fault. It's not your responsibility because you've already qualified yourself as deserving. You've already determined that you are. So if you've determined that you are through affirmations or whatever else you're doing and you don't receive it, well, guess what? It's not your fault, is it? Because you're deserving. So that's not going to help you. So again, this applies in the context. Remember this, right? Especially for you, Overlord, because you mentioned the childhood thing. This applies in the context of free agency and autonomy, right? In other words, when you're old enough to be responsible for and control your life path, not childhood, where we're effectively dependent and controlled by our caregivers. So we can't change the past. So keep that in mind, is that everything that I'm describing as far as like perspective shifting and using tools, that's only possible in adulthood. So don't think about, oh, you could have done something different in childhood. You couldn't have, right? Neither could I. It was what it was, and we have to move from where we are currently. So true deservedness, and I want to break this down because you might think, well, deserving, well, the word it exists in the English language, right? So it must mean that it can be applied in some instances, in some cases, in a specific way. That is true. That's why I'm going to break it down. It's not typically applied in society in the way that the spiritual community applies the word deservedness. So true deservedness is to, I'm going to break it down right now so you understand what it actually means. But then there's also exceptions. True deservedness is to show qualities that demonstrate your worth in the form of character traits and abilities of the specific reward that you seek. So there's a lot of nuance now you're saying in deservedness, right? Which is that it's a demonstration internally and externally of qualities in the form of character traits, so who you are, abilities, what you can do, of this specific reward. So deservedness is not like in general, like abundance. It's like, bro, can we stop with all this abundance bullshit? No, listen. Abundance is not about abundance of what exactly? Of money, of wealth, of finances, in the form of what? In 10 Ferraris, $1 million, $5 million, 10 like 5 yachts. Well, what abundance? Abundance of love, abundance of great relationships. You might think, oh, all of that abundance. No. Your specific behaviors will determine the types of outcomes that are obtained through those actions. Because again, in some cases, there are exceptions, such as, not exceptions, but there are circumstances outside your control, like luck. Now, random occurrences. Now, you might think, Constantine, based off your previous videos, I wouldn't think that you believe in luck or random occurrences. Well, whatever I'm calling luck or random occurrences are things that we don't understand that are outside of our control. You can call that grace. You can call that a blessing. You can call it a curse. You can call it whatever you want. But the point is, it's outside of your control and you can't factor it in. It's called an externality. You can't factor it into the equation because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Like, say, for example, it's a windy day, you're playing soccer. You kick a ball and it's going right towards the net, right? You're about to score and a gust of wind takes it. Now, you can call that God, you can call it whatever, right? But the point is, it's outside your control that you wouldn't be able to factor into the equation given the specific moment of you firing the ball at the net. So there are events, circumstances like that will occur that are outside your control. So keep one thing in mind, is that when you experience these events, it has really nothing to do with you. You might think it does, right? But sometimes you have to be able to have that discernment that I always talk about and find out, okay, what is you and what is outside you. So this is actually a very crucial point, because now we're talking about childhood specifically, because remember that in childhood, because we can't actually make that discernment, like we couldn't make that discernment in childhood because we thought everything was us. right? Because as children, we're inherently self-centered. We have to be in order for us to survive. So our feelings of worth were internalized through the way we were treated and seen by people around us in childhood. So the rational faculties were underdeveloped or undeveloped basically in childhood. So we couldn't think through our experiences and realize that ideas and emotions were basically projected on us that basically had nothing to do with us. And you know this, right? Sometimes you'll see people like snap on other people. It has nothing to do with the other person. Or you're having a crappy day. Nobody's doing anything, but you just have like a mood. So keep that in mind, is that when those things are projected onto us as kids, we think it's because of us. So we're not able to make that distinction. So again, this is the difference between what's within you and what's outside of you. But unfortunately, when we're kids, we think that what's outside of us is actually within us. And then we grow up believing that everything that we internalize from other people is actually us. It's a part of us. Okay. So, but then you have to be very careful with this, because then you might be thinking, you might be justifying yourself. No, I'm deserving. So the thing is outside of me, right? So you have to be very careful. You should always assume that you're responsible. Because if you don't assume that it is your responsibility and you could have done something different, then you're always going to resort to blaming things or putting the fault or putting the responsibility or pointing the finger outside you. Even if those things are true, even if it's true that the wind took the ball, even if it's true that something happened and it wasn't your fault, it's not going to really help you, because the only thing that you can control is what you do. So you have to have these self-corrective measures. Again, as an adult, right? Because self-reflective and self-corrective measures, they're not possible as a child, in addition to the fact that we're entirely dependent emotionally and physically on other people. So just to hammer that point home. So which means get deservedness out of your vocabulary, because true deservedness is to show the qualities that demonstrate your worth in the form of character traits and abilities of the specific reward you seek. However, there's always an element of, like I said, luck or random chance, put it in quotes because of all the things I just mentioned. So there's some kind of arbitrariness to success that you can't actually control, right? Or it feels arbitrary. You can call it God, divine intervention, whatever, right? But the words I'm using are like colloquial words that we use in the English language. So please just understand what I'm trying to say. These things are outside your control that you don't understand. Arbitrariness, luck, random chance, these things occur. So what do I mean here? Like, you could just come up with all the examples, right? Your parents. So outside of your control, random chance, arbitrariness, whatever. Again, call it whatever you want. Your parents, your year of birth, your geographical location, your demographic, your socioeconomic class, your school, the food provided to you, the people around you, your environment, your genes, etc. Right? All of these things are outside of your control, and they all play into the equation of you kind of like developing. It doesn't mean that they're deterministic, because again, eventually, like, we have autonomy, we have free will, we have rational faculties, we have more control over our lives. But again, all of these things, we didn't control them. They were outside of our control, and they play like a big role in shaping how we actually develop and how we tend to think by default. Okay, so there's always forces outside of your control, and the analogy I give here is the analogy of a game. So who makes you, right, the supreme arbiter of what those qualities are? You're like, I have all of these qualities, therefore I deserve, or I am worthy because I exist. No, sorry. I mean, listen, you exist. So what? If you're a shitty person and you just decide that you deserve, you should just get what you want because you decided that you deserve it. So keep that in mind. So you're not the supreme arbiter of what those qualities are. That's why you have to always self-reflect. You have to internalize things. You have to read history, read philosophy, or at least, meditate, get different perspectives, talk to different people, right? Get an outside sense of, are you thinking about things in a way that is inherently limiting you? By the way, Overlord, you're doing exactly what I'm describing right now. So kudos to you. Thank you for the question. You may not necessarily take somebody else's perspective, but it's good to have different perspectives, so that way you can internally gauge whether what you're doing is something that you should just continue doing, because there's no like corrective action. There's no, like, say for example, one of the offers that I'm on, we have a teams model. So we don't give one person the authority to make recommendations for their client, which means we make decisions collectively as a team. Why? Because there's quality control, right? If one person makes a mistake, somebody else is there to catch it. So 2 brains are better than 1, 3 brains are better than 2, right? As the saying goes. So keep that in mind, right? It's important to have these, so you're not in your own echo chamber, right? So, and I'll yeah, so about this, so you have to know specifically what you're doing, whether it's helping you or not. So you can't rely, and you're not doing this, Overlord, but I'm just saying in general, generally speaking, we as humans, we can't rely on a singular perspective because everything that we see will be influenced and interpreted by that perceptual filter. So, and if that perspective is limiting, which inherently it is limiting because it is a perspective, then it's technically impossible to expand our minds and then learn something new that's going to allow us to evolve. So we have to be able to take on these different perspectives. Also, not your own echo chamber is like not only yourself, but also like the specific videos that you watch. Like I mentioned in previous videos, you're watching one person or one type of video that, and they have this specific philosophy about like how the universe works or whatever, then it's very likely that you're going to adopt it. And you're going to try your best and you're going to do everything that you can. And oh my God, you're not getting the results, right? But then if you do get it, it's the confirmation bias. Oh, I thought positively and I got this thing. Well, maybe you were doing something in that moment, or maybe you possess some kind of quality, but you're ignoring all of those other things and you're focusing on only the one thing that this other person is talking about, or this one thing that you're focusing on. You're focusing on only that, and you're ignoring all of the other qualities and all of the circumstances that are occurring. And you're attributing, it's called the attribution error. It's a logical fallacy. You're attributing the success or the result to that one thing, which in fact is not true. So this goes actually to your point, Overlord, about you haven't really added anything of value to another person's life, right? That's what you're saying. So again, you're focusing on that one point and you're thinking that that is, first of all, that that is true, and you're framing your reality, or at least part of your reality, around that belief that you have, which is not technically a truth. It's just a belief, right? So let's talk about adding value to a person's life. Like let's take 2 extreme examples, right? So first example is hyper rich children, right? Of billionaires, multimillionaires, whatever. There's a reason, there's a trope that goes around as far as like them being involved in like drugs and parties, because it's actually true, right? You have no adversity. There's no pain. There's nothing for you to push through. There's no challenges in front of you. You're basically given everything. So they get caught up in drugs, parties, behave completely responsibly, given all the resources that they have. So what does that mean? Because they have things they're deserving? Because you got to think about it like that. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that just because they have things, they have access to things that they're deserving? Well, they're not demonstrating, quote unquote, the deservedness of those things that they have. So you have to ask yourself, right? Do they deserve that? And then on the opposite side, how about Jesus? Did he deserve death? Did Gandhi deserve assassination? Martin Luther King, did he deserve to be assassinated? Right? Did Nelson Mandela deserve to be imprisoned? They were all killed, not Mandela, but they were all killed for their goodness and benevolence. So did they deserve death? Right? So if your answer is no, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, they didn't deserve death, but they got it. And these people didn't deserve money, but they got it. So does deservedness make sense? Does the concept even make sense? Can you even apply it properly? So take those 2 extreme examples and understand that people who on the surface, the way we use the word deservedness, do deserve, or sorry, they don't deserve good things, and they get all the good things, right? And the people who don't deserve any bad things, they get all of them. They get assassinated, right? Prison, tortured, etc. So keep that in mind. It's just not making sense. You could see how like deservedness right now is crumbling through what I'm saying and through the video that you're watching, hopefully. So how can you truly know in a dynamic and unpredictable world if you're quote unquote doing everything right? You can't know. You cannot really ever know as a fact if you deserve something or not. You cannot know if you deserve something or not as a fact. Never be known. So just get that word out of your head. Even if you're playing a predefined human created game with rules and guidelines, like the soccer example I gave you, there's always an element of luck or arbitrariness to success, like the wind example, right? So final thing I'll mention here, so I don't like beat you to death with the deserving hammer, is if you believe, and I don't want to make you feel guilty about this. I don't think it's going to happen, but just understand everything I said, right? organize that in your mind and understand, number one, so look internally, find out all of the things that you need to be doing to obtain the specific outcome that you want to obtain, because it's not generalizable, right? These are character traits. The character traits are generalizable insofar as that they will, any process that you pursue, they will contribute to that process. So whether it's like your habits or your character traits, it's true that it will contribute to that process. But once you engage in a process, remember that you have to do things related to what you're doing to obtain the result associated with that process. So what I mean by that is, well, you can have all these positive character traits, but if you're pursuing a relationship or you're pursuing a business, those two things are going to be like different processes depending on the specific outcome that you want to obtain, right? Whether it's X amount of dollars per year, or, you know, having 2 kids with the woman of your dreams, you're going to go about those things in a different way as far as their processes. But internally, you need to have like the, you know, a certain set of qualities or attributes, abilities that will allow you to apply those things to different processes. So the point that I'm going to mention right now, I'm about to mention, this is the most critical point regarding deserving, and you're going to see how this is like the nail in the coffin. Deserving doesn't even make sense. So finally here, if you believe that those who receive deserve, so you say I'm deserving, right? So I should receive. Then those who do not receive do not deserve, right? Poor people, they don't deserve because they don't get, right? Starving children, they don't deserve because they're starving. If they actually deserved it, they would have food. The mentally ill, again, they don't deserve it, because if they deserved any type of success, if they deserved the life that perhaps they want internally, then they would have it. But they're mentally ill, so they don't deserve it, right? So just keep that in mind, is that when you take this model of the world, you also create, not only do you create an inner conflict, but you're also creating a conflict not only with the world, with the universe, like, what do I have to do for the universe to love me, right? But you're also creating a conflict with other people inherently. Because, hey, listen, if you get something and you decided that you got it because you deserve it, then the people, like I just mentioned, the mentally ill, the starving children, poor people, well, if they don't have what you have, it's because they don't deserve it. So be careful with the application of deserve, and try to get rid of it from your vocabulary, and understand that there are arbitrary elements, random elements, elements of luck that we cannot control, even if we do everything right. So the best thing that you can do is, as I always say, turn your attention to what you can do, and do the best that you can in accordance with some of my other videos and what I've covered. There it is. There it is. I hope that was helpful. I hope, you know, you could see, Overlord, everybody could see, I could see that deservedness does not even make sense. It doesn't make sense, because once you get rid of this entire frame of deservedness, then you don't even think in those terms anymore, right? Because think about everything that I just said, right? And let's take your final point here. How can I get over entitlement without debasing myself in my eyes? Well, first of all, it doesn't make sense, because what you're doing here is you're not getting over entitlement, because if you get over entitlement, you're still trying to see things from the frame of entitlement or deservedness. So I'm not doing a reframe here, I'm doing a transframing. So we're going like above the situation, and we're seeing that it doesn't even make sense. So when it doesn't make sense, then what you're doing is you're essentially leveling the playing field. So it's not like over here, like not deserving and deserving, it's all here, right? So you're no better or no worse than anybody else, right? You are who we are. I don't deserve what I have. You don't deserve what you have, right? Because here's the thing, is like, you have a channel, you have access to the internet, you have a computer, you uploaded some videos, right? So you have access to technology, right? Like I said, there's people living under bridges, bro, right? And there's this guy that whenever he's there, I feed him whenever I see him, and he lives in a sleeping bag under the fucking bridge, and he's got like an umbrella there and whatever. And I go to the corner store, and whenever I see him, he's almost always sleeping, and I bring him food. And he's woken up like a couple of times, and I've spoken to him for a few minutes, and you can tell this guy's mentally ill. So he's mentally ill and homeless. Come on, bro. Like, if you think about it in terms of deservedness, you cannot be like a compassionate, reasonable, you know, person who can tell this person that they don't deserve a home, they don't deserve to, have a relationship because of how they are, right? It doesn't make any sense. Like the entire deserving culture, it doesn't help. It doesn't help. Stop seeing things in terms of like deservedness and entitlement. It's not that you don't deserve, and it's not that you're not entitled. It's that it doesn't make sense, right? That's what I mean. It's not even like a conversation that we should be having. Because the thing is, like, once you stop feeling like you deserve things or you're entitled to something, then what? Then you're like, okay, well, what can I do? Right? Like I mentioned in the video, what can I do? What are the things that I can do to put myself in a better position? Right? So you're taking your power back. You're like, okay, so forget about deservedness, forget about, okay, what happened in my childhood that was outside of your control. That was not something that any child, should go through. Obviously, we didn't have control over these things, but they just occurred, right? So we have to ask ourselves, given everything that has happened in my past, where I am currently, because I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you have the ability to make decisions in your life to improve your life or, make your life worse, right? So you have the option of like, what do you want to do? So you have to do things to move you in the right direction. Hence the whole purpose of this channel, right? To help you like develop your character, go through a process, live by certain principles, act by virtues, right? Take certain risks, be brave, be honest, be courageous, right? Be strong. And that way, as you build yourself, you're better able to access different opportunities, take advantage of those opportunities, and then build a better life. But you can't rely on other people to give you what you need, right? So that's why I'm trying to help. Because here's the thing: is if you think about everything that I talked about, nothing was really meant to like just evoke emotions, right? You got to evoke emotions if you want people to act. Well, yeah, that's partially true, right? But it's really just generating this kind of like internal, like detonating a nuclear bomb inside you, like in your brain, to help you see things from a different perspective. Because once you have a different perspective, it's like you're taking this object, right? You're taking this diamond. My camera's messing me up. So you're taking this object and you're looking at it from a different perspective, and you're like, oh my God, I thought this thing was flat. But now you turn 45 degrees and now you can see it's 3D. The thing that you thought it was, it's not actually what it was. It's something else. So once you take that different perspective, you can begin to see life a little bit differently. And you can start to understand nobody deserves anything and nobody doesn't deserve anything. It just doesn't make sense. People just have what they have. We are what we are. We are where we are. And we just move from that point forward. Right. So hope that was helpful to all of you, to Overlord, to you. I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, let me know. If you want to ask a follow-up, go ahead. For anybody else, if you have a question, have a comment, disagreed with me, whatever, just let me know in the comments, right? I read them all. I address all the comments, as you could probably see. And that's it. If you like the video, make sure you like the video despite my my crappy camera doing this stuff, all this light changing business. And yeah, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to my newsletter. And until next time, I will fix this camera and I'll see you soon.